We have our integrators and our visionary on our panel. So I'm really curious. There was a few questions around a very generalized topic. And so we'll kind of break it down in a couple different pieces. So first off, how does a business owner or CEO identify when the need for an integrator comes up? What are some of those triggers that they might look for?
I can jump in on this one first. My experience with one visionary was she could not take a vacation. And once we had things rolling, everybody knew their roles. She could take her first 2-week-long vacation and check her email once a day. Mm-hmm. So the business was running her instead of her running the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We like to tell the story of my first day at my first client. The visionary told me, I'm a trapped visionary. And I said, okay, what does that mean? And he said, I would love to be on our corporate board. I would love to work on our sales team. And I would love to write for our industry publication and work on our corporate culture. But do you know what I spent all my time doing? Working in QuickBooks. So I've trained a ton of controllers in my life. So I got someone on the staff to take over all the accounting and finance. And then he was freed up to hire a sales team, put in a CRM program, and grow the business. So that would be another sign when the visionary's trapped and can't get to the things that they want to do, and that will move the business forward.
Excellent. Adina, you were sharing a story earlier today. You can kind of leave out the names, but I think the situation's pretty applicable, right?
Yeah. So I have a client, relatively new client for me, and she is the CEO and is running a business, and just reached a point where she knew she needed someone. She needed that right hand person, and just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it all. And it was always something that was important to take action on, but she never did. And finally reached a point where she is about to have a baby in 3 weeks. So, and there was no one to step in and ensure that the business was going to continue to run smoothly. And so that was kind of what put her over the edge and almost forced that next step for her.
There you go.
So yeah, I guess it doesn't have to be having a baby, but just any kind of life event whether it's realizing, oh, I need to take a vacation at some point, or just anything that if you can't ever step away from the business at all with confidence in the fact that it will continue to run without you, you definitely need an integrator.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So I see that a lot, in my practice as an independent marketing consultant. I sit right next to the CEO and we make decisions on the growth of the business. And I see there's often a miss, and this is where it's opportunity and the need for integrators. There's often geez, things aren't working right. I can't take a vacation. People aren't doing what I say, any number of things. And I think oftentimes people say, I need a book, or I need to bring in a culture coach. Right? There's all sorts of these big things, and I try to stop. I'm like, who's your right hand? That you can get to the culture, you can get to those things, but that is a slow burn process. Who's your right hand? And if you don't have one, if you don't have a right hand, you're going to need to get one, because the culture is going to take a long time, but a right hand is going to be like tomorrow, right? You can go tomorrow, we're going to make it better than today. And that's just going to continue to grow. So I aim for fixing culture because that's a little easier, but what I really need is an integrator. I need a right hand. Yeah. I think in Game of Thrones, they had a name for that, didn't they? Like the King's Glove or something like that.
You would think with my name, John, that I would know stuff about Game of Thrones, but I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've never watched them.
I'm sure there's some fans here, but I think they call it the King's Glove. We'll go with that.
We'll go with that. I'm not going to object. So then, okay. So now, there could be events, there could be an aha moment, there could be that burnout phase for the visionary to identify that need for the integrator. What would you say are some of the traits that a visionary should look for in the integrator? What are the skill sets, background? What are some of those things?
You want me to take that as the visionary in the group? Tell you what I look for.
You sure?
Not me. You know, what are the things that I suck at and I know? And that's a lot of things. It's a very big list. But the things that you look for is, where's the diligence? Where's the math? Where's the steadiness? Where's the idea to kind of see the big picture and chase after it? Us visionaries, I mean, we're terrible people. We're horrible at those things. We really are. And the self-awareness of that is big, but you know, we need each other. But those things that we're not is the first sign. And knowing that, like, Roger and I have worked together now for probably up on a decade now, and we have a great relationship. I know exactly where I am, and he knows exactly where he is, and it's a great relationship.
Yeah, I think that's really important, to have complementary skills. And there's a visionary and integrator assessment that you can take, and you know, that's always a really interesting exercise. You take both of them, and then you and, you know, the visionary and the integrator compare, and they see where specifically there are overlaps and where there's complementary skills. But I think beyond that, it's chemistry. A lot of it's chemistry as well. You know, knowing that you have trust. There's like this complete trust, and that, you know, you're able to have your same page meetings and walk out of that room. Even if you disagree on something, you walk out of that room and you're aligned, and there's someone that, you know, an integrator isn't a yes man. It's someone who's willing to push back and have the confidence to do so professionally. And, you know, again, there's that mutual trust that you know you have each other's backs, and there's that chemistry.
One thing I think you don't look for is necessarily an industry background. I don't think that is necessary. As much as people probably like to think that, well, I need someone who's done this before, who's been in this industry. As someone who's been in many different industries, I find it's a strength to bring those different backgrounds in and different ways of looking at it. So I would say, no, you don't have to have the same background.
Great. Mark?
Yeah, I think what a visionary should be looking for is somebody who's got some experience working across the company in some capacity, working with multiple functions, so they can kind of talk the talk with each one and, you know, translate for other functions. I think that ability, you have to have that. You have to have, I think Roger and I have had this discussion many times, you have to have gone toe to toe with another function. You know, have you argued with manufacturing or marketing to get something done? You know, you just have to be able to be fluent in all those. And the other thing I think John alluded to, he said stable. I call it unflappable, because as a integrator, all sorts of things are coming at you. And so you have to be pretty unflappable and know how to kind of leverage your experts in the company. So those two things to me are interrelated.
Okay. When kind of to summarize this part of the conversation, the analogy that keeps flowing through my mind is it really is a marriage of sorts, right? Mm-hmm. And they need to balance one another out, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about we'll call it the dating process. So how do you go and search for a integrator? And specifically, what are the pros and cons of looking internally versus externally? Is there a pro and a con? How does that all play out?
Yeah, first. Go ahead, John.
No, I was going to give the implementer's story on that. So you say it, Mark.
I think one of the places you should look to is your internal employees. You may have that one person that's hiding there that everybody kind of goes to. Yeah, so you may already have that person. Mm-hmm. So that's where I tell people to look first. And then there's other resources. I think it's, I actually had it written down here. It's on LinkedIn. Integrator Search Forum is a free way to find people. There's Keystone. There's a few other search firms that are specializing in helping visionaries find integrators. So they're out there. There's ways to get them. And the EOS community is pretty strong in the Twin Cities. So if you know somebody that's practicing EOS as part of their operating system, just go ask them. Somebody will know somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta get out of the camera, buddy. I'm gonna call.
I can share.
Cameo.
Sign of the times. That's perfect. I'm surprised I haven't had one run by. What I was thinking, I look at how have I found, or how have my clients primarily found me, and I'd say two things, two ways. One, I've either been originally introduced through one of the implementers in town. So if you know any implementers, that's always a good source. They know lots of people. Or two, just truly referrals from one of my clients to another clients, and they've been talking because they're members of peer groups or groups like this, and it's just a matter of talking to each other, and then my name has been passed along, and it's gone from there.
Go ahead, John.
So I'd say the blood supply for that is networking and taking it, like what you're doing right now. The oxygen supply for success there, connecting that is to take networking as seriously do your accounting or anything else in your business. And it's important for the connections we're all making here, right? We're all connecting and learning from each other. This right here is very likely going to spark a connection between a visionary and an integrator. Directly, I don't know. I don't know if Crystal Miller and Roger Sherping should talk about that, but I know we're in an environment where that could happen. And by taking things like this and embracing them as a serious part of your business, that was what will spark those things. You're right. There are places where you can go. There's a group and that sort of thing, but the act of networking is the blood supply and oxygen supply for those types of relationships to begin. They're not all integrator and visionary. Some of them are different levels of people, but that act of networking is in our community at UFM of 80 people now, that constant connectivity is what keeps those businesses growing.
And just so you know, it is a difficult challenge to find an integrator. Mm-hmm. If you read Rocket Fuel, it tells you that only 2% of the population is qualified to be an integrator. And on top of that, it says visionaries outnumber integrators by 6 to 1. So not only are they hard to find, but then you got to find the one that has the right chemistry for you. So it's not easy, and it's going to be a lot of networking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. I love the push on networking. So, all right. Well, let's jump over to, let's assume for a moment that we've made the connection. We have an integrator, and what I'm curious about, so like Roger, maybe I'll kick this over to you to start the conversation. But you were saying earlier, industry doesn't matter necessarily, but how do you take a potential external to bring them in, to ramp them up so they become part of the team as quickly as possible? What does that onboarding process look like?
Well, I would just start out by saying, working as a fractional integrator, I'm never going to get to the point where I know as much about this business as the people on the team do. So, and I know that. So I look at it like when I run the weekly leadership team meetings, I don't feel like it's my goal to come up with the answers to all the problems that come up. I feel like it's my job to lead the team to the right conclusion. So it's my job to understand, to ask questions, to probe, get them thinking in ways that they might not be thinking about, and lead them to a decision. I'm not going to make, I don't expect me to be the one that comes up with the decisions.
Great.
Yeah, I think I concur with that. I think like for me, one of the things I do is, I take both a top down and a bottom up approach. So top down being like start with that VTO, and that is really the most effective way to get the highest level view into the business, especially when you're looking at, your more near term and then your longer term goals and, what the primary issues that are trying to be solved are, what are the rocks. So that gives me very quickly a view into truly what are the priorities of the business. And then I can help, as Roger was saying, facilitate, action that needs to happen in order to, keep the company moving in the right direction. And then the other thing I like to do is hold one-on-ones with the leadership team. So I get kind of that more bottoms up and, just understand what are their primary barriers, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and how can I help remove those barriers and help ensure that they feel empowered, and perhaps, in some cases, even provide some mentoring and coaching in order to help them succeed. So again, like Roger was saying, I'm not there necessarily taking everything on and solving things and learning every aspect of the business, but I am there to understand what are the most important priorities and how do I empower and enable the team to succeed.
Yeah. I'd add a couple things to that. And I think you're spot on, Adina, looking at kind of their EOS documents. One of the nuggets I have found with those that have level 10 meetings and they keep the notes is going back to their old L10 notes so I can see what issues they've been solving, what things have come up. That gives me a great history. And the other thing I do way up front when I work with a visionary is we create a learning list, things I should learn. And then we put an agenda to it. So almost every week or every other week, we're knocking out something that I should know about that I might not be able to bring in, but it'll help me help them.
I like that.
Got anything to add?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm a visionary. I've already forgotten the question. So that's where I say what they said.
All right. Well, then we'll just move on. So to the visionary, though. So what is your process to build that relationship, right? Because it can be because to your point, what made me think of the question really was your visionaries are going to be different than integrators. So how do you, as the visionary, as the in quotes leader, how do you mesh those two personalities together to become that twosome that you need to be to run the organization?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to really concentrate on building trust. Mm-hmm. That piece is really, really critical. One thing I found about myself and other visionaries too is we're actually pretty horrible leaders sometimes. And it's when we get outside of our lane is when we get really, really bad. And so part of the process for identifying that is being really honest with yourself is where do I struggle? Where am I making people frustrated? Where am I not advancing this business? Being humble and honest with yourself, writing that down, and then reaching out and saying, well, who can do this? What does this group needs? So I think finding someone you can trust for that and building that trust is a critical part of that process of getting the integrator engaged. Here's why I think the trust is important is you're partnering with somebody and coming together with these two different energies, and they're both equal, none greater than the other. I know there's this thing that, visionaries, I could never do what you do. I can tell you every visionary looks at an integrator and says, dude, I could never do what you do. Not even a chance. I'll mess the whole thing up. And we know that about ourselves, and having so honest with yourself and trust in that, because the advancement is only going to come out of the partnership. That's it. So trust and self-honesty are the two key things that have been in my process.
I think someone said it earlier. It's essentially like a marriage, it's a relationship. So you're right. Trust, critical, being okay, being vulnerable and exposing what your weaknesses are so that the other can help with that and complement those. So yeah. And a lot of that happens. There's a reason that the same page meeting is so important, because it's a safe place where it's just the two of you one-on-one working through things to make sure you're in sync.
Yeah.
I was going to say trust and same page. So they got both of my points.
I think there's an expectation from both parties. They have to have it is that they both have to expect they're going to work at this. It's not easy. Just a quick story with one of my first clients. We walked into a meeting. We were not on the same page. had a staff meeting, and people saw that we had different opinions on a topic. They called us out. And right after that meeting, we said, we've got to be super disciplined on doing this, and we have to be a united front. So it is, to answer your question, that process, it's definitely the same page meeting. And I think that experience for us really raised our expectations that we're going to have to really work at this to make it work. We got along, but we definitely knew we needed to work very hard at making it work.
Yeah, I found a great tool recently. Is if anybody's watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls thing that's been on TV this month. We're not getting sports any other way, so it's going crazy. But it's really worth a watch when you look at that through the context of the relationship between Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. It's amazing. That is a business learning tool as much as anything else. They understood their roles, this integrator, visionary relationship. It's funny. I kind of realized that is a great demonstration of how those two powers come together to create amazing things. So great recommended watching.
Good call.
And they always liked each other, right?
No, that's kind of the fallacy is that everybody, that's right. Yeah, no. But they understood each other.
Yep. Very good. So then, I thought one of the best questions, what do you do? And John, I don't think you can answer this question right away. So you have the visionary who they're a little possessive of what they do because they think they've always had to do it all the time, right? And they can't trust the work or the decisions to pass those on to someone else. How do you deal with that situation to help them understand that they can relinquish control over the things that they shouldn't be doing?
Well, I've worked with visionaries who, like John said, know that they shouldn't be doing this. They say, half my job is doing the visionary stuff. The other half of my job is doing the integrator stuff. It saps my energy. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. I want somebody else to do it. I've had visionaries tell me, hold other people accountable. I can't even hold myself accountable. It's just not my skill set. So it's kind of, like John said, realizing where you belong and where you don't belong.
Adina?
Yeah, I was just sitting there reflecting, and I feel like I've been really fortunate in that anytime I've been brought in, it's been a situation similar to what Roger was just describing, and the visionary couldn't wait to stop doing those things. I imagine it would be pretty detrimental to the business if a visionary insisted on keeping those things and undermining the efforts of the integrator. Fortunately, I haven't been in that situation, but I'm sure it does happen because Gino Wickman and Mark Winters talk about letting go of the vine all the time, and how critical that is. So.
Is it maybe a better way to ask the question, how much of it is setting expectations in that, if you want to compare it to that marriage piece, when you're courting or dating, it's kind of the expectations conversation between the visionary and the integrator.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. If you approach it from that standpoint, I think, defining who owns what up front and establishing those swim lanes is really important. I just went through that with the client and it was great. She made this list of all the things that were important for the business and needed to get done. And then we actually, kind of the beginning of a scope document of what this, what the integrator needed to help with most. And we went through and actually said, what things would she own and keep and what would I then take off her plate. And so, right up front, we established those swim lanes. So that's been really helpful.
Perfect.
I think the other thing to realize is if the owner or the visionary has been doing everything for a long time, they might be very reluctant to let go of certain things. and overly excited to give away other things. So all these tasks may go at different rates. So I've had a couple clients and they've said, finance is mine. And I said, all right, I get it. I understand why, but I'd like to be in the loop. I want the reports so I can understand what's going on. And I've had a couple other tasks that they weren't ready to let go of. It took some time to gain that trust. And then they finally said, all right, I don't want this anymore. So that process of letting go, as much as you'd like it to be all in one big shot, is a very gradual process for some visionaries. They're just not ready. They've done it themselves for so long, they're really reluctant. So to me, it takes time. It's a glacier that moves slowly.
John, anything to add from a visionary standpoint?
Yeah. You know, cartoons and pictures work really well for visionaries. We're kind of simple people, and also big picture. That's kind of where we get our energy, is what's the big picture and how do we get there? Not less so the process to get there. And I have a little chart that I draw when I talk about this. I'm gonna see if it works here, but I don't know if you can see that. But there it is. So the visionary lives here on a company's path to growth. I started it, I made it come into something, and then here's where the integrator needs to come in. We understand the big picture of, if you want to get here, you're never going to do that on your own. Okay, that's enough of my little graphic, but you're never going to do that on your own. But we get that, right? Like, okay, I get it. I don't, details, I can't get there on my own. I need an integrator. The more I can make that happen, the faster we'll get to that place. Because that's what we think of. We're always occupied with that upper right-hand side of the chart. That's where our heads naturally go. There's a letting go, which probably has a lot to do with esteem and self-value and some sort of, what would I do if I'm not doing those things? Mm-hmm. There's a kind of a discomfort with some of this visionary stuff. Like, you're going to clear half of my schedule. That's not, I mean, that, while that's important and needed, some people look at that and go, that's kind of scary. Am I even driving value anymore? So you have to be honest. Yes, you're helping us get to the upper right. It's a different value.
Great. So I have a couple more questions, and to the audience, if there's anything you guys want to ask, please put those things in the chat, and we'll get to those questions if time allows. So the last couple of questions I have, the first one, so this is more of a broad questions about EOS. How does EOS apply to different businesses, like say a community bank? Are there any businesses or industries where it wouldn't apply?
I think Mark's most qualified to answer this, having been an implementer.
Yeah, I'd say where it doesn't work is, think about a partnership of attorneys. EOS is in the accountability chart is going to prescribe that hierarchical model. And attorneys don't like that. Not to pick on attorneys, but they all want to be equal partners in sharing resources. So it generally doesn't work there. Does it work at a bank? Yeah, one of the first banks one of the early adopters of EOS, I think, was like a branch of US Bank. So it can work. I think size-wise, maturity-wise, those are some variables that need to be considered. But I forget the stat. What do they have to be, Roger? 2 to 50 million in size, 10 to 250 employees, I think is the stat that I remember.
I think you got it backwards. 2 to 50. Okay. Yeah, that's right. 2 to 50 employees, or 10 to 250 million in sales. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there just has to be that leadership team in place that's, you know, ready to do something different to improve the company. That mindset needs to be there.
Great.
Yeah, I will say it can work. What it should and can work, but where you may run into problems are some of, you know, if you're not willing to let go of legacy relationships and structures, and you know, you quite often see this in some family owned and run business, multi-generational family run businesses. If, you know, someone is no longer a fit and you're trying to address what we call RPRS, right person, right seat issues, you have to be willing to, as painful as they may be, you have to be willing to take those on and do something about it. If you're not willing to go through some of those growing pains, then it won't work.
Perfect. John, Roger?
Roger.
That was it.
We can't let you off the hook that easy, Roger.
I don't know what I can say. I mean, I haven't seen an instance yet where I've used EOS and it has not moved the company forward. Mark made us aware of the professional services model might not work, but every other one it works that I've seen.
Yeah, I know it can work for everybody. What I see kills it is when you don't have buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
Right.
you're bringing in a system and an operation and a way to do things, and if you don't get buy-in in a strong way, it's like anything else, it'll tank.
Yeah.
So that is it absolutely works for any business, but if you don't get people say, you know, some people are, it's just another thing that you're bringing in to try to make us do better. If you don't get buy-in,
If it's looked at as a flavor of the day, it's an uphill battle.
yeah. It's too bad because it's funny. It's a very simple it's doable.
Yeah.
But some people have a cynical look on things like that. I don't know why, but they do, and that can prevent buy-in.
I think it goes to the old adage, right? Who moved my cheese, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, you got to be willing to adapt and be flexible, whether I think it's EOS or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next question I had, how does decision-making work in this relationship? How is authority determined? Is the visionary the ultimate decision maker with full reign, or is some of those decisions delegated over? And if so, are there any commonalities as to what might be delegated?
Mark, you want to give the book answer first?
I was going to give my own answer. The integrator, of course, is the tiebreaker. You'll see that in the books. Ideally, it's the team making the decision, and the visionary is a team member. And what I found with one of my favorite clients ever was she would say things as an owner. And our finance guy would say, are you saying that as the owner and it's a dictate? Or are you saying it as a visionary and we can debate this?
Yeah. Good point.
Which hat are you wearing?
Exactly.
Now okay, so the book says the integrator is the tiebreaker. Well, I talked to a visionary once whose company was considering making an acquisition, and the leadership team was split evenly, with him being on the side of doing the acquisition. And so the decision theoretically went to the integrator to cast the deciding vote. The visionary said, no, I own the business.
Right.
We're going to do what I want. So that's why I say the book answer and the real answer might be different.
That's fair.
Mhm.
That's fair.
And just one aside, one best practice I try to bring to my clients is tell people what the decision-making model is going to be ahead of time. Sometimes it's a dictatorship, other times it's a democracy. And if it's a dictatorship and people think it's a democracy, well, then their vote didn't count, they're upset. So sometimes it's incumbent even on the integrator to say, what's the decision-making model here?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
One of the big mistakes I made, of so many, but at one point is I had an equal partnership in a few of my companies, in one of my companies, and that's just a business structure. And it's not so much how decisions are made in that. I mean, when you have equal partnership, now somebody's got to have 51% of this thing, otherwise we're never going to get out of offshore, right? I know that now. But having that, it's not so much the critical, what is the big decision of the day? It's how do you move forward? And if you have a structure where you can quickly move forward and get into the cadence of growing a business, Mark, to your point, does everybody understand the decision making? Are we structured that way? Avoid traps. Things like they sound great, right? We're all in one team, equal partnership. Worst thing I ever did. I love the business. We grew. We did great friends, but that wasn't a good way to run a business.
Adina, anything to add?
No, not really. I feel like it was already said. So,
All right.
yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, we do have a question from the audience. Tim, I'm actually going to unmute everybody, and now we don't have to hear my dumb voice all the time. Tim Ellis, you had a question. You should be unmuted at this point.
Yeah, thank you. A question, two questions. First one is, what are the size of the companies you work with as fractional integrators? And the second one is, have you ever worked with companies where you had to sell and implement the EOS process, or have all your clients been EOS companies when you engaged with them?
Mark, I feel like you have probably the broadest, come across the broadest number of scenarios.
First of all, thanks, Tim. It's good to see you again. I don't try to sell any client on EOS. If they know what it is and they've self-implemented it, great. I would say almost every single one of my clients has been self-implemented. So I might go in and tidy up the tools at the most. As far as the sizes go, what I look for is, do they have any kind of leadership team in place? More so than anything else, because then it gives me a good indication that the visionary is, sharing some of the decision making and the power structure of the company. My sweet spot, I like companies that are under $15 million because I can get my head around what's happening, and that's just me personally.
My clients tend to be under 10 million, 10 to 15 at the most. And as far as, I don't sell companies on EOS, but if I have a client that's not an EOS company, I still make them do a scorecard. I make them do level 10 meetings, and I make them do an accountability chart. I just don't tell them it's EOS. I just tell them we have to do these things.
Yeah, I would echo that. There, like, as an integrator, I'm not normally brought in to sell them on the value of doing EOS. They've usually realized it at that point and realized they need help. I have worked with companies who are well down the path of self-implementing, as well as those who are, all in and have been working with an implementer for a couple years. So, and the size truly varies. I'd say I've mainly worked with 2 to 20 million. Obviously, very different issues you're dealing with, and I think it was brought up earlier. Really the key is, what does that leadership team look like, and how is it functioning? When it's larger, I think in some ways, certain dysfunctions are amplified. But, when it's smaller, I think people are still wearing more hats, and, you can have one name in multiple boxes in an accountability chart, but you can't have 2 names in one box. And when they're smaller, I've even seen some of that and had to, fix that pretty early. So, yeah, a lot of different scenarios.
All right. John?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think there's a ton of market opportunity for traction at the 100 million and less. To Adina's point, I think there's just a lot of things structurally in a business that is needed. So from a market opportunity and how to advance those businesses, just by stage of where those size companies are in their business, the need is higher. But I also think it's a fallacy to think it doesn't go higher than that. There is a level of dysfunction at some of the largest companies that this can address. It really can. And to think that a billion-dollar business has all their shit together is a fallacy. Sometimes they need it more than anybody. They just don't know it, or they have too much pride, or these decisions are spread so far and so wide in the big company. But how hard is it for us to look, to open up Forbes or the Wall Street Journal and say, well, that billion-dollar company needed this? It's super easy when you think about it. But from a market opportunity standpoint, I think the integrator thing is at under $100 million, just because there's so much need there.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing that I should have added. I mean, I happen to be a fractional integrator. I think there is a threshold at which it makes sense to have a full-time integrator, and that, there's not a hard line there. But, I've said this before, my goal as a fractional integrator is to work myself out of a role. I'm in there and I'm going to do one of two things. I'm going to help mentor and elevate someone who is there internally to take on this role. And even if it's, the company's still so small, small enough that it doesn't make sense to have a full-time dedicated integrator, that person can still wear two hats and sit in two boxes, like I was saying. And my role is to help, really elevate them and bring them up. Or the second scenario is I'm in there and I am helping put these processes and tools in place and drive the business forward. And it grows to the point where, yes, now the company needs that role full time. And then I'm helping to onboard that person and again, transition myself out.
Great, great. Well, in the spirit of time, we're 2 minutes before the hour. I'll go around quick to our panelists. First, I'm going to just say thank you for everybody that showed up today. Thanks to our wonderful panelists for kind of taking us down this path and hopefully opening our minds up to what might be. I also want to thank my sponsors, Compass Realty, School of Marketing, and SDK CPAs. And with that, I will let's start with Roger and any kind of closing remarks.
Sure. So we've been spending a lot of this time picking on John and picking on the visionaries because of their uniqueness, but this seminar was about the power of the visionary integrator relationship. And I love this story that we've passed around amongst ourselves. And that talks to that relationship. So if every company in the world was run by someone like John, a visionary, we would have the most wonderful ideas that all got half done. And if every company in the world were run by people like Mark, Adina, and me, you would see the most consistent 2% year-over-year growth that you could possibly imagine, but no magic would happen. So that's why you need both.
I like that. Adina.
I love that. Again, we talk a lot about EOS and we throw out a lot of the language, and for companies who are looking to grow and get to that next level, or you feel like you're kind of stuck somewhere, again, it doesn't have to be everything EOS all in. I would just encourage you, if you haven't already, read the book Traction. If you prefer reading those types of things in more bite-sized pieces, What the Heck is EOS is another good one. But just, adopting some of the tools and principles would make even a huge difference versus trying to take it all on at once.
Very good. John.
I'm up. Yeah, I had a great conversation with the guy who's a fractional finance and analytics guy yesterday. His name is Ben Major. And he and I had a great conversation. We said, those of us left brain and right brain, we need each other. And I've realized so many things in business come down to these simple things, is we really, really need each other in order to have, a visionary needs an integrator, left brain needs right brain. It's when you come to that realization and then embrace it. You might realize it, but what we talked about earlier is you might not want to let go of that stuff that you were doing before. But true growth only happens when you realize it and embrace that growth of that relationship. It's really amazing what happens when that humility comes in, and the growth then can happen from there.
Great. Mark.
John's group, UFM, is a bunch of fractional marketing folks. And we know there's fractional CFOs out there. There's fractional HR people. Well, it's finally gotten to the point where there's fractional integrators out there. So you can get somebody on your staff, if you're one of those trapped visionaries, at a part-time basis, super affordable, and quite frankly, you get a lot of bang for your buck. So that option is finally available to business owners. They don't have to invest in a full-time general manager. They can get somebody part-time. I've got one client I work with half a day a week. And, no pun intended, we're getting traction.
Well, this has been a great discussion. I have really enjoyed kind of walking down this road with you guys and getting a better understanding for my own purpose about how this relationship works. And I hope that the audience got some takeaways as well. And with that, let's go have a great holiday weekend, and let's enjoy the time we got. Thanks, everyone.